Sometimes it's better to be a single parent than to bring the wrong person into your life. Submitted for the approval of the TikTok Society. This one is a long one, guys. I call this the Singing Bones. There was once a widower who had 25 children. He had so many children, in fact, that he eventually lost count. When their mother died, the family just couldn't get along without them, and the dad had to work so much that he had no choice but to take a new wife. But the only woman that would take him was this ugly old thing with a sharp tongue and a heart full of stone. But he married her anyway. After all, the poor man had so many children he couldn't afford to be choosy. The children, though, soon found that Belle Mare, as she was called, was very cruel. Little by little, she took the money that her husband gave her for food and buried it in the yard under a rock. The children started to complain about hunger because they were only being given a little bit of rice per day. Belle Mare would whip the children, and they soon learned that they just had to suffer in silence. Papa would come home long after the children went to bed, and he always had a good supper, so he never knew that his children weren't being fed. But Belle Mare begrudged the children so much that it wasn't long before she started to think of how she could get even more money from the man without having to feed the children at all. My husband is so blind, he doesn't even know how many children he really has. There must surely be a way that I can keep him fed and keep his money at the same time. And when I have a nice little nest egg, I'm gonna leave him and his whiny brats. Then it'll be too late for him to do anything to stop me. Now, one day Papa came home, as usual, hungry and tired. He didn't even bother asking about his wife and definitely couldn't take notice of any children. Belle Mare served him his usual dinner, rice, beans, and this time meat with no bones. But it seemed to him that the meat had an unusual taste. How is it that this meat has no bones, he says. Bones are heavy. Meat's cheaper without the bones, Belle Mare responds. Papa ate quietly for a while, then he said, "Why aren't you eating?" She says, "I have no teeth. How can you expect me to eat meat with no teeth?" That's true, he says, and he quickly dropped the subject because he didn't want to make his ill-tempered wife any more angry, and she got mighty right ugly when she was angry. Soon after, Papa seldomly saw all 25 of his children at the same time. Some would be running here and there, so he never took notice that some might actually be missing. And in truth, he took little notice of what was going on around him regardless. But one Sunday, the house seemed a lot quieter than usual. Thinking they must be up to no good, he called for the children to come here. But when they came, there were only 4 pairs of twins, 2 sets of triplets, and 1 toddler. "Where are the others?" he asked Belle Mare. "What others?" she says. "It seems to me I have many more children than this," he says with a frown. "You don't even know how many children you have, and you got the nerve to ask me," she responds. "If you care so much, they've actually gone to go see their grandma to help the poor old thing with her chores around the house. They'll be back in a few weeks." Now, this didn't seem strange to Papa because the children always go visit their grandma. So he said nothing else about it, not wanting to throw his little ugly wife into a rage again. So things went back to normal. Papa would leave early in the day and the children would be fed 1 grain of rice. Belle Mare continued to serve him rice, beans, and meat with no bones for several weeks. But once again, he grew curious about the flavor of the meat. "Wife," he says, "what kind of meat is this? I've never tasted a flavor like this before." This sent Belle Mare into a rage. "First you complain that there's meat with no bones when I'm only trying to save us money. Now you're complaining about my cooking? Well, if you don't like it, you can just buy the meat your dang self. And cook it yourself too." Well, Papa was too tired to argue, and he really didn't want to feel the wrath of her sharp tongue anymore, so he just dropped it. He ate his supper thinking, "She's right. The house, the supper, and the children are all her business. Maybe I should just stay out of it. Why should I be concerned with a woman's work?" The days would pass, and each night he continued to come home to a supper of rice, beans, and meat with no bones. And even though it tasted a little bit curious to him, he decided he was not going to say anything else until one Sunday when he realized that his house was deathly quiet. "Now, what are those children up to?" he said to himself. "It is way too quiet. Come, children, come to Papa," he yelled out. One by one, the children began to appear as if they'd been hiding in the crack. Papa soon saw that something was very wrong with this, because it was only one set of twins and the youngest child. Where are your brothers and sisters? He asked. The children looked at their stepmother with frightened eyes and didn't say a thing. Old man, said Belmere, snapping at him, are you complaining again? The children are visiting their grandmother, of course. They'll be back in a few weeks. Now hush and stop bothering us with your complaining and your questions. After Sunday supper, Papa went and sat under the big old oak on a rock and just enjoyed his quiet. He watched his three children play quietly under the tree. They seemed so sad and so thin. He began to think about his other children and how he missed all of their laughter, the noise, and the games they would play on Sunday evenings. He was at the point where he was about to go to the grandmother's house and get them because he missed them so much when the missing children started singing. Their voices seemed to come from far away. The children are on their way back home, he says to himself, and he began to get very happy. The singing grew louder and louder, and then he was able to finally make out the words of the song. Our stepmother unalived us, our papa ate us. We are not in a coffin, we are not in a cemetery. Holy, holy, holy. Well, Papa thought his ears were failing him. What kind of song is this for these kids to be singing? He calls to the children, come to Papa, little ones, come to Papa. Tell me, why are you singing such a strange song? The sweet voices started singing again, this time closer and louder. Our stepmother unalived us. Our papa ate us. We are not in a coffin. We are not in a cemetery. Holy, holy, holy. The singing seemed to surround Papa around the big tree. It's as if it was flowing from each stone on the ground. He got down on one knee and put his ear to a rock. Once again, he heard his sweet angels sing. Our stepmother unalived us. Our papa ate us. We are not in a coffin. We are not in a cemetery. Holy, holy, holy. That's when Papa rolled the biggest stone under the tree away, and to his horror, he found the bones of his children, and the singing grew even louder. Our stepmother unalived us. Our papa ate us. We are not in a coffin. We are not in a cemetery. Holy, holy, holy. Bitter tears fell from Papa's eyes as he began to realize the sad truth. His cruel wife had unalived his children and then fed them to him, and he actually ate them. He fell to his knees and began screaming out, children, please forgive me. Why didn't I ask about you? Why didn't I watch out for you like a good father? I should have seen what was happening. That's when Papa leapt to his feet with the most murderous intent. Belmere, I'm going to get you. You're going to pay for what you've done to my children. But it was too late. When Belmere heard the singing, she knew she'd been found out. She had slipped out the back door and ran to the rock where the money was buried. Now, her plan was to dig it up and escape. She clawed through the dirt that was around the children's bones in order to get her money. But suddenly the bones began to sing louder and louder and louder, like a wailing from a storm, until it grew so much that the earth began to split beneath her. The sky opened up and heaven's fury broke loose right on her. A mighty lightning bolt struck Belmere right there on the spot. The wicked woman exploded into a heap of dust. Gradually, the storm began to dissipate, and like tears falling from the sky, it began to wash away the dirt from the children's bones, and they looked white like fallen snow. There was no trace of the evil Belmere in sight. Papa put his children's bones in a coffin and placed it in the cemetery right next to their true mother. For the rest of his life, he never touched meat again, haunted by the thoughts of what he'd done. He lived in great sorrow for his murdered children, his heart heavy with his own guilt. He wished to be released from this burden and often prayed for death, but instead, heaven punished him with a long life, a very, very long life.